Hey Astro Kids, and welcome back. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing this big event of the full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. So this is a energy that I have been sitting with for a while before coming to this video, especially because this will be in a conjunction with my ascendant. So this is an energy that definitely I'm feeling connected in with, and we have to talk about first, what does a lunar eclipse represent? A lot of people are confused about what a lunar eclipse is, and they tend to confuse it with just a normal full moon. The full moon will happen with the lunar eclipse, but the lunar eclipse is something different entirely. That full moon is always an auspicious time of the year for abundance, for releasing, letting go, things coming to an ending. This eclipse is different. This is a very inauspicious time where a lot of unexpected things can happen. A lot of sudden changes and turns can happen, and you can find yourself going through a lot of deep internal work and transformation during this eclipse time. So depending on where this is in your chart, if there are any planets that you have in your natal chart that are going to be affected by this eclipse, this will actually affect you in a huge way, where this can bring about big changes and unexpected turns in your life that can transform you in a huge way. So we're going to talk about first, what is a lunar eclipse? And then we're going to break it down in terms of this being in Scorpio, and with it being here in the nakshatra of Anuradha, which is falling in between, in the middle of Scorpio. So we have a lot to discuss here as far as this eclipse goes. And of course, this is going to start us off with these summer eclipses, which will be a 3-part eclipse. So we have 4 eclipses, but this one will be a period that has to do with the 3 eclipses that will take us into November. So first of all, a lunar eclipse is happening when the moon is being blocked by the Earth's shadow. So the Earth will sit in between the sun and the moon, which is blocking out the light from the moon. And so this is where we get this eclipse of the moon that takes place here during this lunar eclipse. Now, remember that we talked a lot about those shadow planets of Rahu and Ketu. So those shadow planets are playing a huge role in the eclipse season. This is coming from the actual scripture and the legend behind Rahu and Ketu, how they were excluded as demons from the godly cabinet. And so as these shadowy planets, as we call them, or illusionary planets, come close with the sun and the moon, this is where we get the eclipse. It is said that they're taking their revenge out on the moon and the sun as they come into this position. And so the eclipse season traditionally is seen as a time of darkness where these shadowy or illusionary planets take place. Now, if you recall in my previous videos when I talked about Ketu and Rahu, I talked about how they deal with karma, how they are dealing with the shadowy aspects of life, going in, dealing with our demons, transforming, healing at this deeper level, right? These are planets that deal with the non-tangible in life, the shadowy aspects, right? The aspects of the human psyche that are unresolved, that need healing, that are suppressed and repressed. And so all of these things can come up during an eclipse. And especially as this is a lunar eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. Scorpio is the sign that deals with our trauma, our fears, all of these darker aspects of our psyche that's unresolved, that needs that work, that improvement, right? So this is why when we talk about Scorpio, we talk about it being a sign of transformation, of healing, of self-improvement, of going within, discovering yourself at a deeper level. So this is where this lunar eclipse becomes a huge time of actually going inward, right? And I talked briefly about that a little bit when I went into the horoscope for this lunar eclipse coming up. But this is a huge time of going inward. And so this is not really a time of making decisions, going out and starting new projects, doing different things. This is a time of actually meditating, reflecting, going in, facing those unresolved parts of yourself that need the healing. Now, another thing that's happening that makes this especially true is that this full moon lunar eclipse will be sitting with Ketu and not Rahu. So Ketu, remember, is the planet that is taking us out of the illusion, right? So these planets of Rahu and Ketu are dealing with the illusion, or the Maya as we call it, the illusion of the material world, of the tangible world. So these planets are actually dealing with the non-tangible, the things that are going on beyond the physical. But Rahu is the planet that takes us into the physical material world. And this is how Rahu teaches us that there's more to this material world, is by actually giving us the things that we want in the material world. And that brings us to the realization that maybe this isn't all that I thought it was going to be. Ketu does the opposite. Ketu pulls us out of the material illusion and shows us the spiritual, shows us the mystical, the things that lie beyond the physical. And so this is why Ketu is also the co-ruler of Scorpio. Scorpio is all about digging deeper, going beyond, going to the truth, the things that are hidden beneath the surface. And so Ketu is actually a co-ruler of Scorpio, which is why I talked about this a little bit earlier, how Ketu is happy in the sign of Scorpio because it is the ruler of Scorpio. Rahu is also very happy in the sign of Taurus because Taurus is dealing with the material aspects of life, right? Our money, our security, and Rahu is wanting to take us into that material world. Ketu, though, is at home here in the sign of Scorpio. And so this gives a huge effect in terms of reflecting, going inward, meditating, working internally on yourself. And this is very appropriate as we have been going through these unsettling times here back in 2020. And if you remember, this is when this whole axis of Ketu in Scorpio and Rahu and Taurus began, was back in 2020. So this is a continuation of this same karmic lesson, this same cycle that we're all going through collectively, of going in, cleaning up the unresolved issues, dealing with the things that need to be faced internally. So this is actually a time of going inward rather than going outward with this lunar eclipse. So that is a huge theme that is playing out here. Now, another theme is because Scorpio reveals things to us that are hidden or that are deep beneath the surface. This is a huge theme centered around the truth. So what is the truth that will come up through this experience? And so this is a huge time where you may find yourself facing fears, facing insecurities, facing hidden truths that you tried to repress or suppress, or things that have been hidden and cloaked away from you that are coming into your awareness at this time. So this is a huge time where the truth can come up during this lunar eclipse. Now, we also have to keep in mind that this is a lunar eclipse in the nakshatra of Anuradha. Now, this is an energy that I'm familiar with. I was born with my ascendant in Anuradha, and I talked a little bit about this. So for those of you who have an Anuradha ascendant or know someone who has their ascendant sign in this nakshatra of Anuradha, feel free to check out that video. I will leave a link above and down below in the description. But to talk about this briefly, Anuradha is symbolized by a lotus. It is representing this ability to go through difficult times and still rise above it, right? So if we think about a lotus, it grows in the muddy waters. And so this is playing into this transformation of Scorpio, this ability to go into the unknown or to go into unsettling circumstances and to face that darkness, to face that unknown factor, and to rise up above it. This is a huge theme that is playing out through this lunar eclipse. Now, another big thing that Anuradha deals with is love and devotion. And so especially any sort of spiritual practices, any sort of meditation or habits that can help you in working through the unresolved issues, working through any areas that need this growth, this improvement, this transformation, this healing internally is huge at this time. So once again, I'm going to say that this lunar eclipse is a huge time of going inward, not going outward. So anything involving meditation, journaling, anything that will help you with this internal work of clearing, of healing, of facing yourself and going inward, exploring yourself, connecting in with yourself is a huge theme of this lunar eclipse. Now, another thing that I wanted to add into this before going deeper into the nakshatra, because we are going to talk about the pada as well and how that will affect everything that is happening in this lunar eclipse, is that Ketu, because it is a planet that pulls us out of the physical, out of the material world, it is also a planet where we experience losses. And so this also can be a lunar eclipse, depending on where this is in your chart, what planets in your chart this is affecting. This can be a planet where you experience endings, conclusions, periods of things exploding, things getting lost, things that you are no longer able to hold on to. And so this can also take place during this lunar eclipse where you're being forced to clear and release these things. Remember, I said in the beginning that a eclipse is a very intense period of change. So this is not like a full moon where this is an opportunity for you to release and let go very calmly. This is something where you can go through abrupt changes that force you to release and let go. So there is a lot of deep internal work that tends to be triggered through the eclipse season. So this is huge depending on where this is in your chart, where you can see this sort of explosion or ending that is happening within your life as well. Now, this full moon lunar eclipse will happen within the third pada of Anuradha. This is a Libra ruled Navamsa. So this is a Venus led energy. And so especially during this time, you may find that music, that sound healing, that journaling, practicing art, any of these things can help in any sort of healing process, any sort of internal work that you are trying to do. So especially these Venus-led activities, even relaxing, taking a salt bath, all of these things that are going to help in your relaxation and in your creative expression are going to help improve in this area. And once again, this is a huge time of resting, meditating, going inward, reflecting, doing all of this internal work rather than trying to do things externally. And many people ask about this. Many people have tried to start new projects or to close new deals during an eclipse season. And what they have found is that there have been unexpected problems or twists along that journey of doing so. And those things can be resolved or worked through, especially after the last eclipse of that period. But to avoid that, it is important to do the internal work before trying to do anything. So within that period of between the lunar eclipse and the last eclipse that will happen in November, I don't recommend doing any sort of new projects or any sort of new deals if you can help it. Of course, anything that needs to be done and taken care of, there is this meditation and this remedy that you can do depending on your chart. So all of you who are looking for this advice as far as what can help you, what can work through this, I'm not going to give you anything in this video because it will depend individually on your chart. So making sure that you're checking with your astrologer, or if you are looking to reach out to me, I will let you know based upon your chart before trying to do anything that will help accelerate or cancel out anything in regards to this eclipse. But what I do recommend more so than anything else is to focus on the internal work, the internal changes that need to take place within your life above everything else. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the aspects that are also involved with this lunar eclipse as well. And before I go into the aspects, I also want to point something else out as well. So Libra is the original sign that rules that seventh house of partnership. And so this is especially a time also where you want to be careful about making any sort of quick decisions in terms of your relationships and connections. You may find that you are quickly trying to end something because there are problems or issues that come up, and this can backfire later on after the eclipse season, where you find that you made the wrong decision as far as leaving that relationship. So remember that anything Scorpio related is going to bring up unresolved issues, traumas, fears, insecurities, all of these things that need to be worked through and dealt with. And so it is best not to try to run away from anything at this time. All of the things that are coming up are things that are hidden, once again, beneath the surface that need to be addressed and worked through, especially with this not only being in Ketu, but also being in this conjunction with, not only with this being in Scorpio, but also being in this conjunction with Ketu, and along with that being in Anuradha, which is a nakshatra of love and devotion, and in this Pada, which is a Libra Navamsa. So there's a lot of layers here that are having to do with relationships and dealing with those unresolved issues that may or may not come up in this situation here. Another thing that can happen is the opposite, where you are quickly trying to get into a relationship and you find that it doesn't work. There's some issues that come up. Once again, these are karmic areas where these unresolved issues can come up, where this is wanting you to work through this and release this with this Ketu and Scorpio energy that is playing into this. Now, getting into the aspects here, we do have Venus that will also be in the sign of Taurus as well. And so once again, relationships are hugely coming to the surface. Again, Venus is at home in its sign of Taurus. It's very comfortable here in this conjunction with the Sun and Rahu. And so this is an area where, again, anything that is relaxing, anything that is going to nurture you with that Taurus energy on the opposite side of this axis is huge, right? The Sun is there where there is a focus needed in the security, in the relaxing, in the comfort in this area where this can help you through this process. But you also want to be careful because these are opposite energies. And so with Scorpio here, it is urging you to face the unknown, to face the difficult, to face these unresolved issues And Taurus is sitting on the other side of that, where we're wanting to go into what's comfortable, what's familiar. And so once again, going to bring this up again, that anything involving relationships where you are trying to cling on to what's comfortable, or you're trying to leave because it's uncomfortable, these types of scenarios can backfire as we come to a close of this eclipse season. There's a lot of karmic lessons that this is trying to urge you to face and resolve that will help you evolve and grow into a better version, especially as this is a lunar eclipse happening in the sign of Scorpio. This is here to help you transform, to evolve into a better version of yourself. So there's a lot of work here that is involved in this eclipse. Now, also, along with Venus being there with Rahu and the Sun, Mercury is there. Mercury has technically shifted, though, into the sign of Gemini just before this eclipse happened. But still, Mercury's still clearing that zone where it's on the cusp of Taurus and Gemini. So it is playing a very important role in this as well. And remember that Mercury, along with Venus, are the two relationship planets that are involved in relationships and connection and communication and expressing yourself. All of these things are related back to these planets of Venus and Mercury, right? They are planets that want to connect. And so once again, this is a huge theme of this eclipse, is in connections and relationships, and not only in connecting with others, but in connecting with yourself. So this is something big to look at. And again, paying close attention to where this is in your chart. Are there any planets that are being affected by this? Because this is going to significantly change how this eclipse is going to affect you in your personal life. Now, also, we want to look at the dispositor of this lunar eclipse. And because this is in Scorpio, our secondary depositor of Ketu is there with the moon. So we already talked about that. But our number one dispositor that we need to look at is Mars. Mars is the primary ruler of Scorpio. So what is Mars doing at this time? Well, if you recall, Mars is still in the sign of Gemini, where it's very uncomfortable here, right? This is where a lot of energy, a lot of impulsivity is happening in this area of Mars in Gemini. And so even though we had this Mercury energy shift ahead out of that Aries zone, we still have Mars happening in the sign of Gemini. And so once again, you want to be careful with this eclipse season about making impulsive decisions. With this Mars in Gemini, this scatters the energy out into different areas where now we're not really focused on what are we trying to achieve. Mercury is in a practical zone, so that can help us in making some better decisions, but Mars is still kind of scattered in that Gemini activity, where you want to be careful about the decisions, the choices that you're making in terms of this eclipse. Now, Mars is also going to be aspecting over to Saturn, which sits with Pluto. So again, there's a lot of this deep internal work and transformation, as Pluto and Saturn are two planets that are in retrograde at this point. So there's a lot of internal work, a lot of internal growth and maturity and healing that needs to take place with these retrograde planets. Now, you also want to look at in your chart, what is Venus doing? What is Mars doing? Because remember that this is going to be a lunar eclipse in Scorpio, and Mars is the primary ruler. Venus is the nakshatra ruler. The Pada ruler of this as well. And you want to look at what is Saturn and Ketu doing. Those are going to be the huge karmic influences, as Saturn is the nakshatra ruler and Ketu is our secondary ruler of Scorpio as well. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind and consider. And if you want to consult with me, I do have all of my information down below in the description, along with the comments. And so that is something where if you're looking for some more help in interpreting this and seeing how this is all playing out in your chart, feel free to contact me. But this is something where you want to make sure that you're paying attention to everything that's going on there related to this Scorpio energy, as this is going to affect everyone differently. But the big thing that we can definitely see from this eclipse is that this is a huge time of intense changes, and especially intense changes that can transform us on a huge way, on a huge level internally, where we can heal, we can grow through this experience, especially for those of us who are willing to take the time to meditate, to reflect, to journal, to do whatever is needed to go internally. And as I said before, as this is happening in that Libra Pada, this is a great time if you want to include some sort of therapeutic practices like painting, if you are a painter, or listening to music, anything that is involved in art and comfort, taking a salt bath, doing self-care practices. All of these things can help you in this process as well. But this is a huge time for this internal change, this internal growth, this transformation process to take place. Now, what I'm going to do is I will take a look at how this will affect you according to all of your moon or ascendant signs, but also keep in mind that this can vary depending on any sort of planets that are affected in your natal chart as well. So as always, for those of you who are new to my channel, when I get to this part of the horoscope, I always want to give a disclaimer that I'm not using tropical astrology. So this is not according to the tropical zodiac, which has to do with the seasonal points and having to do with that original zodiac from hundreds of thousands of years ago. I'm actually using sidereal zodiac, which comes from the actual position of the stars in the sky, and this is according to where the stars are now. So a lot of people don't know this is they are getting into tropical astrology, is that those stars are actually according to the original placements of where they were founded. But the stars are moving. So they are actually moving counterclockwise along the ecliptic, along the sun's path. So this is according to where the stars are now, not according to that system of the tropical zodiac. This is also going to be based upon Jyotisha or Vedic astrology as well. So this is primarily focusing on the moon sign. And as I do these horoscopes, I do tend to focus on the ascendant as well, as that is a huge point. It affects your entire life as it maps out your life from the point that you were born. And so I always recommend that you look at these horoscopes from the position of your moon sign or your ascendant sign. You really should be looking at both, as the ascendant will show you physically how this will show up in your life, and the moon will show you how this will affect you at a mind level. The moon is representing the mind, right? This is why we see a lot of times at certain phases of the moon, animals will act strange or people will act strange. This actually is dealing with your behavioral patterns within the psyche. So the moon is connected to your thoughts and feelings, your state of mind. So it's important that you're looking at these horoscopes from your moon sign or your ascendant sign, not your sun sign. So let's go ahead and start this off here. For those of you with an Aries moon or Aries ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse in your 8th house. Very intense. The 8th house is the original zone of Scorpio. Of course, for those of you with an Aries moon, Aries ascendant, you have the natural zodiac. So this is how all of the placements were originally positioned in the sky. Now, for those with this lunar eclipse going on in their 8th house, this is very intense. This zone of Scorpio here in the 8th house is all about crisis, spiritual growth, transformation, all of these sudden events and shifts. And also, this is a huge zone for shared resources. So any sort of joint finances, anything involved in intimacy and deep connection is here in this 8th house zone. Along with that, Scorpio is the sign that reveals the things that are hidden beneath the surface. So we see things like mystical knowledge, occult knowledge, investigative work, all of these things that deal with tapping into the unknown or the hidden knowledge. So here in this zone of the lunar eclipse, this is especially going to be a huge time for anyone with an Aries moon, Aries ascendant, to go through a very deep and profound transformation. Now, again, you want to pay attention to any planets that are involved in this as well. But this is a huge time for this internal work, this internal transformation where a lot of hidden truths can come up to the surface that can help you grow internally through this position. Now, for those of you with a Taurus moon, Taurus ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse in your 7th house of partnerships. So this is a huge time where you can see some unresolved issues coming up within your relationships. And this doesn't only have to be in romantic relationships. Any sort of relating to other people, you can see some unresolved issues or insecurities or fears or blocks that show up here. You may experience some losses or some confusion in this area. Again, this lunar eclipse is a time to work through those issues. So I don't recommend running from any sort of issues that may come up in this area, but figuring out a way to resolve this, how to work through this, is going to be the best thing for you. And especially you want to look at, okay, this partner has some issues or things that they're showing me in the relationship. Is this having to do with me internally? So looking at this in terms of a mirror, looking at your own reflection and seeing, are these things that are coming up in the relationship having anything to do with the things that I need to work on internally with myself? That is huge during this time. For those of you with the Gemini moon or Gemini ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse in your 6th house. Huge time for you to improve upon yourself, to work upon yourself, similar to what we said with the Aries ascendant, Aries moon. The 6th house zone is originally controlled by Virgo. So this is a huge time for you to actually go within yourself and to focus on any areas that need work and improvement, especially when it comes to your health, your daily routines and habits. This is an area where you want to pay close attention to this. This lunar eclipse can bring up some unresolved issues, some conflicts, some areas where you really need to get things in check in terms of your daily routines and the things that need to be taken care of within your life. Any sort of debts, any sort of financial issues can come up at this time. For those of you with a Cancer moon, Cancer ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse in your 5th house zone. So that 5th house is actually a very auspicious house that has to do with your creativity, your children, your romance, your entertainment, your daily hobbies. So this is an interesting area where you may find that you are being urged to do something different or to let go of an old hobby or habit. So this is definitely an area where you want to let go of anything that no longer serves you. This could be an area where things like gambling, drinking, anything along those lines could come up to your attention as something that you need to release and let go of. This could also be a time where any sort of projects that no longer serve you could be coming to an end as well. But this is a huge time of really clearing the way for new possibilities to come in, especially as we're going to have that solar eclipse happening later on in your 11th house in the month of June. So we'll talk more about that in a future video, but this is a huge time of clearing, releasing of any sort of habits that may not be serving you any longer. For those of you with a Leo moon, Leo ascendant. This will be a lunar eclipse in your 4th house zone. Very intense, similar to what we said with the Aries ascendant. This is a time of going inward. This is a time of deep reflection. That 4th house is another private house, where this is especially going to be a good time for you to relax, to meditate, to do any sort of internal practices through this eclipse. So especially for those of you who are needing to go in and clear things out, and this could also manifest in your home environment as well, where you may need to arrange things, you may need to do things differently within your home. That can happen as well. This, although being a physical manifestation of the things that need to be dealt with internally at this time. For those of you with a Virgo moon, Virgo ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse in your 3rd house of communication. This is a huge time of resolving any sort of communication issues, any sort of issues along the lines of making deals, making negotiations. A lot of you who have come into this time period of this eclipse here with a Virgo moon, Virgo ascendant may have faced some issues in terms of expression. And we talked a little bit about that before with Saturn that has been sitting there in your 5th house. And remember that Saturn and Pluto are going to be retrograde together in your 5th house of expression, where there's a lot of work to do around communicating, around expressing yourself, around putting your talents and skills out there. And so this is an area where this is especially asking you to remove those blocks, to remove those insecurities, to remove those things that are stopping you from fully expressing yourself and putting yourself out there, as that 3rd house also deals with entrepreneurship and courage. This is a huge time of really putting your skills, your talents out into the forefront and learning how to communicate, learning how to express yourself without these fears, these blockages, these barriers. So there's a lot of internal work to do there in terms of any sort of fears that may be stopping some of you. And again, you want to pay attention to any planets that are in there as well, because that can especially give you clues about what it is that you need to remove and work on in this area. For those of you with a Libra moon, Libra ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse in your 2nd house. Very intense. That 2nd house is a Markastan house, and especially for those of you with a Libra moon, Libra ascendant, that is a tricky house, where some of you may have had some very intense experiences growing up with that 2nd house Scorpio. This is definitely an area of resolving any sort of childhood traumas or issues or anything from your early age of growing up. If there are any sort of issues there that are unresolved, all of these things can come to the surface at this time. And so this is definitely a time of clearing out those fears, any sort of experiences, anything, especially things that are very traumatic or intense, but it can be anything. It could be something as small as being bullied or picked on. There is some things to be resolved in this area here with this lunar eclipse. You also want to be careful of your eating patterns as well, or any sort of spending or overindulgence in this area. Make sure that you're not masking this healing that needs to take place, trying to suppress this with splurging or spending in this area as well. For those of you with a Scorpio moon, Scorpio ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse in your 1st house, affecting you directly. For those with a Scorpio moon, Scorpio ascendant, this is a huge time of releasing any sort of fears or blocks that are stopping you from being you. That 1st house is you, and this is where this lunar eclipse is happening. And so there may be a lot of you who are experiencing this inability to show who you really are or to express yourself openly, freely, with this 1st house Scorpio. And so this is especially a time where you can experience a lot of cleansing, a lot of releasing through this. This requires a lot of deep internal work and facing any unresolved issues. You may see some things come up in relationships also, as that Sun Rahu combo is there in your 7th house, and especially with Venus, which is going to be the Para Lord, that is sitting there in your 7th house, and with Mars, which is the ruler of your chart and of this lunar eclipse, the dispositor, sitting there in your 8th house as well, and with Saturn, that is retrograde, with Pluto retrograde, sitting there in your 3rd house as well. A lot of intense cleanup in terms of expressing yourself, being able to connect and show yourself freely within relationships. So this is an area where you can go through an experience that liberates you, that frees you internally through this position. And so this is especially a good time for meditation, for reflection, for sitting with yourself, connecting deeply within yourself, for those with a Scorpio moon, Scorpio ascendant. For those of you with a Sagittarius moon or Sagittarius ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse back in your 12th house. So a lot of subconscious things to work through. This may not be as obvious as those with a Scorpio moon, Scorpio ascendant, where you may actually have a lot of repressed issues that are trying to come up to the surface. So this is especially a good time for anything related to listening to healing frequencies, meditation, hypnosis, counseling, therapy at this time with this lunar eclipse. There's a lot here that is trying to come up to the surface. And this is a great time, especially for any sort of spiritual practices. Again, this is happening in Anuradha, the nakshatra of love and devotion, where any sort of devotional practices can help you through this experience as well. You may find that you're going through a spiritual experience, or that you are healing and meditating and doing this work in isolation, and you find yourself coming to tears, or you find certain things that are coming up to the surface here that you weren't fully aware that was there. So a lot of deep subconscious work to do for those with a Sagittarius moon, Sagittarius ascendant. For those with a Capricorn moon or Capricorn ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse in your 11th house. You may experience some losses or difficulties in this area. There's a lot here in terms of you feeling like you need some sort of support or guidance through others. And the universe is trying to urge you with this Rahu Sun activation there in your 5th house that you need to be able to stand on your own. You need to be able to express yourself freely. And so there's a lot here to be cleaned out, to be worked on with this Ketu in the 11th house, where you may find yourself in an area of loss or confusion around your friend circles, around getting the support or gains that you want at this time. This is really stopping you in your tracks and making you come aware of needing to hold that confidence, that self-esteem within yourself, instead of relying so much on others. So this is not to say that you can't be in partnerships, that you can't rely on others to help you, but this is really trying to get you to stop using other people as crutches, or to stop leaning on others as much, and to try to find that self-esteem, that confidence within yourself. This is a huge theme for those of you with a Capricorn moon, Capricorn ascendant. And of course, you want to check any planets that are involved as well. Now, there will be a lunar eclipse in your 10th house for those of you with an Aquarius moon, Aquarius ascendant. This is very intense, as that 10th house is not only a Kendra house, but it is a huge zone for your public image and recognition. And so this can be an area where any sort of things that you've been trying to hide or keep under wraps may come to the surface. So you want to be careful about anything that you're doing from now up into this eclipse period. This is definitely trying to get you to be truthful, to be honest, to be upfront in the way that you're presenting yourself in your career and your public image, where a truth may come to the surface. This is also a time for some of you where you may experience some sort of internal truth or some sort of unresolved issue or fear that needs to be faced and addressed that's stopping you from actually taking the lead and stepping into that high-ranking position or in that position of public recognition that you are meant to take on. So there is something here big where are you stopping yourself from actually reaching the level that you want to attain or the destiny that you're meant to lead here with some sort of fear or unresolved issue. But also on the other end of that, again, want to be careful about any sort of scandals or issues that could come out to the surface with that energy of the things being revealed and unveiled happening there in your public image. For those of you with a Pisces moon, Pisces ascendant, this will be a lunar eclipse in your 9th house. This is a huge time of spirituality, of learning at a deep level. This is definitely a time of meditation, a time of retreat, a time of possibly getting some news from your teachers or reading a book that could bring some great awareness to you. But this is definitely a time of exploring at a deeper level and finding some deep wisdom and guidance that can make a huge difference in your life. So any sort of information, any sort of experiences that are coming to you at this time, you want to pay close attention to that, as that can have a huge impact on you throughout this experience. So this has been your horoscope for the full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio on May 26, 2021. I want to thank you all so much for joining here with me for this horoscope. If you have any additional questions, anything that you'd like to consult me on, all of that information is down below in the description along with the comments, and feel free to leave your comments down below as well. Of course, as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up. If you are new to this channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button along with the notification bell. If you are interested in learning more on Vedic astrology, I do have a course available in the Facebook group, Astrology Lessons with Daquan Jones. The link for that is down below in the description along with the comments. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.